So we had done this fourth letter. Okay. Okay. So we had done this fourth letter from that was signed by the Vilna Gaon, although we pointed out it was not signed by Chaim Volozhiner. And we have here a fifth letter. The sixth one really describes some of the things that were actually done to the Chasidim, but I want to look at the fifth one as kind of an introduction to that. This seems to have been also a letter, another letter from Vilna to, it's not exactly clear where it's to. Could have been within Vilna to people or people around Vilna. Where this seems to be, it's addressed to Alufim Rishon Parnasin Rosnin. So that would mean a Parnas is a person who is like a supporter of a community. It sounds like the community of Rosen. They are faithful shepherds, and Gone Eretzim for Samim. Israel praises of them. Avenu, Achenu Bechirei Hashem. You are our loved ones. You are brethren in the service of God and how much you love God. Sheholchem b'darchei avotehem lishmor derech Hashem. That you go in the way of God. Haloshmatem im lo yadatem. You certainly have heard, if you don't already know, ki chadashim mikarov bo. That new things have come from close. Asher lo sharim avoteinu umachnim shemam chasidim. Umaknim shemam chasidim. Things that our ancestors, did not keep, did not measure, and they call their names. They have a nickname that they go by called Chasidim. It's interesting, by the way, that they seem to have been self-named, the Chasidim. There is a bit of a, you sort of wonder if they had a different name, would it be less of an issue? I'm not saying it would have been, but it is a funny thing to name oneself the Chasidim, which means the pious ones. Now, maybe it was to try and link themselves up with the earlier group of Chasidim in the 11th century, the Chasidei Ashkenaz. But it's sort of funny. It seems like the phrase Chasidim comes very early on. And now maybe they didn't call themselves Chasidim, but it seems like they did. In every city, they make themselves a group. Again, the word Azov is a pun on the word to forsake, but it also means the word hyssop. So Agudat Azov means a bundle of hyssop because it's a quote from the Torah that you use to sprinkle on the leprous one. But it's a pun that they're making here. That's why they've made it with an acronym sign. And it's because of the other meaning of Azov or a homonym phrase or a similar sounding word is lazov, to forsake. But you see where they separate themselves from the congregation, from the community. The earth opens up to their voice. Kol beit tfilatam, the voice of their prayer houses. Now, this is language from Korach, which is not surprising because Korach is sort of the epitome of division within the Jewish people. It says there about Tiba Kaharetz, that the earth opened up. V'datem shonim v'shanot tamam imatbeyesh tavachamim, and their religious thinking is different because they have changed the dye of prayer, the form of prayer that the rabbis instituted. And they interrupt in the middle of prayer with words from the vernacular. Manhige, we saw earlier that they were criticized by the people of Vilna for yelling out in Yiddish in the middle of prayer. Manhige, now, of course, we know from our studies of the Reform that there's nothing wrong with praying in the vernacular. But, again, there's fear here. So they're sort of grabbing at things. Menhage shtus nagu, and they have customs that are silly, that are frivolous. They don't really do the will of God. This is, of course, a quote from Haman about the Jews. Which bitlu Talmud Torah, umavilim kolayom b'divrei hatol v'hololos. These are similar to what we've seen before. They nullify Torah. They don't study Torah, and they waste all day in things of frivolity. Chalu ba'ashan yimayim, and their days are like smoke. V'shagam zeh shana shanimtu mizeh hakat b'kilatenu. And we have they're in our community. V'tolan ma'asehem ki'ilan gadol. You'd go to do kimishpatam, and they hang their deeds on a big tree, meaning they are relying on. That usually means they're relying on an individual. Obviously, here the Baal Shem Tov, I guess. It's funny. Sometimes the Vilna Gaon is called the Ilan Gadol, the great tree. And as long as we didn't hear terrible things, we were quiet. They're trying to say we were tolerant. As long as they were quiet and doing things in private, we didn't make a big deal of it. But now that things are coming out into the public, we have an obligation to speak up. They disparage the Talmidei Chachamim. Now, the truth is that Rav Shneur Zalman, at least when he writes about the Vilna Gaon, he writes in very glowing terms. But so, what are they referring to here? It's a good question. Uvadaknu achareihem, and we checked after them. Matzina rosh hamachasesh shalahem halahu Mr. Iser. So in Vilna, there was this, what they called the Karliner Minyan of Chasidim, and one of the leaders was a man named Iser. Mosif Hevel, Habit Shalmei Raglayim, Kesef Sigim, these are all bad terms about him. Pishta Trano Shenes, he's comparing him to bad things. Mitatim hu Anashav Asher Ito, Asher Akru B'derach Zahamu Kal. People are following after him. Rishutam Sefer Ktav Yad. We've also found a written manuscript in his hand, Yora Be'etzba Al Koma Asehem, that gives testimony and points the finger at all of their deeds. Megala Tefach Machasat Fachaim. It reveals a handbreadth and covers two. Now, what does that mean? That's a phrase from halacha about going to the bathroom, that you reveal a little bit that you have to, but you leave yourself covered. So here, I think what they mean is you can infer from the book reveals a handbreadth, but you can infer from that more than is in the book, that which is covered, that which you don't see. I don't know what book this is. Edut, I assume this is a book of Hasidic practice. Kfi gviat edut chavilot shebiadenu mimaasav uvachutz maskiot kesef betocha ratzufa resbavatenu rabim miode. It sounds like it's sort of silver on the outside, but decrepit inside. And who knows how far down the rabbit hole this goes? Who knows how far these things go? Right. So here you have, this is dangerous stuff, right? Here you have like real, this is how you end up with, wars on groups. This is, we know these things about them. It must be much worse. That sounds like what they're saying. Amuk miyim tzeno. It's deep down, and who can find it? They're hiding things. It's like this sort of fear, that there's something dark underneath. that we're not seeing, because what we are seeing is weird, so it must be much worse. They say right out. Their deeds that are out in the open are disgusting, are weird. Mechuarim means like it's not the word disgusting. It's not exactly the word weird. Mechuar means like dirty. Ke'echad harikim meraked bi kuvi. Like one who dances, like an empty person who dances. Kabate midrashas. Hagidol tekilatenu. Basic knesset gidol tekilatenu. V'chol pedover nivalav divrei kiur. They speak frivolous things. V'yeh sherhuad. And as we have testimony about this guy who's leading them, Mr. Isser, Hoda b'fnei shnei kitos da'anim, and he admitted in front of two groups of dayanim, of judges, about everything. V'shacharnu alav l'fros chata'av. And you know, we have made him admit what he's done in all of the shuls, you know, publicly. That what the Chasidim do is hevel, is empty. And that they do silly things, and they say that these are actually very deep things that have deep, you know, Kabbalistic meaning. And now that we know a little bit of what they do, we can infer from that about everything else that everything they do is frivolous. And if you hear what they do, you should tear your clothes, because it's a big desecration of God's name. It sounds like this Rabbi Isser was forced to recant, to admit. He was beaten publicly, so that could be part of it. Dam tarti mashma. And they go from city to city, they wander. And all of their days are kachagim moadim. They're too happy. Their days are like holidays. Every day is like a holiday. They think that they get reward for not studying Torah. It's funny. This is sort of like, you know, what typically we imagine about the early Chasidim, that they were always joyous. And, you know, we sort of see that in a very Shalom Aleichem kind of way. It does seem like that was their reputation. There was this group in Shklov that became also a big issue. That was one of the first places where this happens, where there's Chasidim and there's backlash. So now this letter says, you know, brethren, listen up, and ro'u es hanolad, see the future, mikatsu, see what this is going to lead to. It's a lot of this is not like, they can't really put their finger on these people are sinning, they're not. But it's like, this is weird stuff. What's this going to come to? Mi yodea ma yulad yom. Who knows what will give birth from this? You know, it could be much worse. Bad people. And then it's signed. Oh, here it says, we are going to chase them down to wherever we can, to rid the earth of idolatry. Anybody who gets there first, you know, in chasing them down will merit life. Now these are fighting words. This is sort of dangerous stuff, you know. This is inciting the crowd against them. And then it's signed, 24, it says that it's signed by 24 leaders of the Jewish people. B'tziref kavod harab meforsem av bezdin, and with the addition of our av bezdin and Dayanim of Vilna, the judges of Vilna, and the great rabbi, which is the Gra, the Rabbi Gudagon of Vilna. Bagam ken lachtam, he also signed it. Now I don't see the signatures. So I don't know if it's actually signed or just says it was signed, because this does seem to be a faithful reproduction. I do have the original. Look it up quickly. So, let's pull up the original. I mean, we don't have the original. What we have is the one that was written over by this person in Brody, copied it over in 1772. I mean, it's the same year. Let's just see if there's any signatures. I think there is. I think the only one that's signed is that letter that we saw, the signed letter on the phone. This is the 6 or 7 minutes. I'll have to check. It's a little bit hard to find it in this text. But I'll check. I don't think there are signatures. I think it just says this was signed. Now, it's hard to know. Were there actually signatures and it's just the person copying it over, whose name we know, who lived in Brody, and he just didn't include the signatures, but he did include them on the previous letter. Or were there never signatures at the end there, and it just says there were signatures, and maybe there was, and maybe it doesn't matter that they didn't actually sign it. So obviously you don't always know. I mean, this was copied over early on. It was copied over the same. It seems like it was copied over, but obviously you don't really know the pedigree when things get copied over. Now, I'm not insinuating that this is a forgery or a that it's a that some scribe in Brody made the whole thing up. I'm not saying that at all. I don't think you could do that. But the original letter, I don't think we have. I mean, this is a copy right afterwards. So from what I understand, when even when you compare other versions, I think they're the same. But we don't have a lot extant because remember, they were burned by the Chasidim. So we only have like 2 or 3 copies of this original, 2 or 3 copies from 1772. So, but the next letter, which sort of continuation of this, talks about a little bit more specifics, who to beat and when, that sort of thing. Now, what's interesting, of course, is that it all changed very quickly. That 20 years later, Chasidim, are much more accepted till the 1980s when I was a kid and there was another war. And that's a different story. That happened later between different groups and Messianism and all kinds of stuff. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.